Really where the power lies. And so I can remember years ago there was a Christian leader, and I'm not sure who it was, it might have been James Dobson, somebody who had said, get your kids out of the public schools. Get your kids out. I'm here to tell you that I think every parent should do what's best for their kids, but the mistake was that everybody walked away from them and let them do whatever they wanted to do. Now go look at your tax bill. Go look at how much you're paying to that school every single year. And have you voiced any opinions on what they're teaching? Have you looked at any of the curriculum? Because when I lived in Bedford, what I saw sometimes was absolutely horrible. And we stood up. Somebody mentioned Marxism, the Marxist movement. Well, in Bedford, we found out that the personal finance class was assigning a book called Nickel and Dime, Why You Can't Make It in America on Minimum Wage. And we had Fox News out. We had a whole bunch of people in an uprise because we're thinking, this is not personal finance. That is a discipline. And bringing in a socialist's indoctrinating book in our personal finance class was not acceptable. And was it a challenge? Because we had actually some people show up and was thrilled that that was in the classroom. We had students who were thrilled that that their class was being dumbed down this way. But we fought and we won that battle. And you win those battles by speaking up and making sure you know what's going on. I would watch the school board meetings, and one of the 8th grade coordinators in Bedford said something about, you know, our kids are being taught that the Constitution is a living document. So I immediately went through all of my information and explained to the superintendent and to the school board why that is not true. He tried to tell us, well, you know, in terms of amending the Constitution. Well, if you change the language, that's a problem. So I was like, no, you're not going to call it a living document. That's not true. And I gave the evidence as to why. I went back and found the historical evidence as to why that's not true. So I encourage you to do that. Like I said, I can't remember this stuff off the top of my head like everybody else can, so I've got some notes. As I said, we're shifting from the liberal arts to the workforce training. And again, okay, thank you. And again, nothing wrong with kids getting out of school and being able to qualify for a job. But keep in mind that there was from the G20 summit, U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, signed the UN Globalist Education Agenda. This is where this is all coming from. This is not organic. This is not something that, you know, your school decides to start a VOTEC school and you're controlling it at the local level. This is now a top-down agenda on our schools. And if you think it's going to be, if you think you're going to have a voice, you're not, because state laws are already starting to change when it comes to the CTE and workforce development programs. And if you read those suggested proposed legislation, it talks about the needs of businesses versus the needs of students. That's a big change that's going on, and something I want to make you aware of. You know, the humanities are still important. Geography, economics, world history, these are the things that C.S. Lewis talked about, why we need to be very careful shifting our education model to the workforce development model. The kids still need to read the founding documents. They need to know what federalism is versus federal control. That's what's going on with these CTE programs right now. We had schools very organically doing this, and now we have state legislation, which is really coming from federal laws, coming through the state. So they are going to start controlling those. They're going to start regulating those. We are dabbling, oh boy, 2 minutes. Okay, so we're also dabbling in mental health in our schools. It's called social emotional learning. And I wanted to touch on that very briefly, because if you think your schools are doing great teaching the reading and writing, just wait till they start treating your kids' mental health. Do you honestly think that our teachers and our schools are going to do this well? Again, this is coming from the federal government, ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, signed by President Obama. Bipartisan legislation. Who voted for that in New Hampshire? Senator Jean Shaheen. Senator Kelly Ayotte. Yeah, big disappointment. I tried to contact her office many times and talk to her about this. Annie Custer. Frank Ginta voted against it. He voted against it. Yeah. It's 1,061 pages, and how long is the U.S. Constitution? How many pages is that? Yeah, 17, okay. 4, okay. It's not 1,061 pages of federal law in our schools. That federal law gave the U.S. Secretary of Education unprecedented power. She now gets to approve state plans. So if you see a state plan, what do you think they're going to put in a state plan to get approval to keep the federal dollars coming? Everything that the federal government wants. And what does the federal government do? They go to the UN to figure out how to run our schools. So everything you see coming through the state now in terms of grants, in terms of legislation, is being, because the progressives who brought this about knew that they'd never get this done if they did it from the federal government. They had to work through the states. That's the facade that exists now. So we have mental health now going on in the schools. And believe me, I think mental health is a critical, critical issue. But when you put this burden on a school and you put this burden on a teacher who does not have the qualification, because I'm already hearing from teachers in New Hampshire saying, what is this? I am not qualified to do this. I am judging your kids in the classroom on their behavior. It's going into a data bank. I don't know where that information is going, and I don't want my kids involved in this. And yet we've got federal grants coming in, and this is what's controlling that. I think that's about it. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things real quick. We also get outside grants. Nellie Mae is a grant organization that has given grants to New Hampshire. Nellie Mae has a specific brochure that talks about how their main focus is community organizing. So you got to look at the money coming in and start saying no to the money. We had an example of a girl wearing a Trump shirt in Epping. Let me tell you something. If you live in Epping, you need to be at that school board meeting. They just set you up. Thank you. They just set you up for a lawsuit. She's going to win if she sues. I mean, I have no doubt she's going to win. You can't do that. You can. Yeah, you can't do that. There's many cases where students have won. And then finally, I just want to say that Barb, the other speaker, I'm just a big pro-lifer, so I'm just going to plug this real quick. She brought up the late-term abortion and infanticide, and I think it's really exposed the evil that exists in this country and the evil that exists amongst people who are willing to support that. It is time to identify evil instead of voting for it. Okay, so I just want to leave you with that, and I want to thank you again for having me, and I'm more than happy to answer questions if you have any questions on what's going on in your school or anything else. Thanks.
Grok TV.